My name is John Gravois. I am joined by the infamous Tom Wason and the inimitable Manushi. Mamajai? Majumdar. It's like one. I'm always off. It's not going to be the only thing I'm off today on. Thank you guys for joining us. We see some familiar faces. So we had a demo that was a half-hour abbreviated version of this talk. If you came to that, we're going to get into a little bit more detail. If you didn't come to that, that's okay too, because we're going to get into more detail, and the detail is what you want to see. Basically, the format of the talk is one, to do either a primer or a little refresher on what ArcGIS Hub is and what folks get when they purchase ArcGIS Hub out of the box, what folks that are working with ArcGIS Online are seeing, and then some building blocks and some tools that you guys can use that we're sharing to help you build some custom apps of your own. And then we'll talk about how to deploy those at scale. So instead of building custom apps and sharing them with either clients or partners one at a time, building things that can get deployed by agencies and organizations all over the world. That sounds good. Stick with us. If not, there's a pool in the courtyard back there. So ArcGIS Hub, the kind of the tagline or the elevator pitch, as we call it, it's a two-way engagement platform. And it was originally marketed and designed for government agencies that are working on transparency, and they're working on incrementally improving their operations. So the idea is open data came before. That was the project that we worked on, and open data is great, but open data is not really worth anything unless you're actually using it for something. So engaging with the public with this data and using data to try to measure your progress and improve and work on these, some problems that sometimes seem intractable. That's what ArcGIS Hub aims to do. But this is just kind of a thin veneer on top of the rest of the tool set that ArcGIS Enterprise and Online gets you already. So we've got a product name, but we're really just using ArcGIS Online in a little bit different creative way. Whether you've seen it or not before, I think this is kind of the most helpful matrix to talk about what Hub does and how it works, how you get it. So Hub is a product, I don't know if you call it freemium. So everybody that has ArcGIS Online has a license to do Hub. So you can create an open data page and create websites and start to share your work. This is something that we ported into ArcGIS Enterprise with the name Enterprise Sites to make it not so open data oriented. But that site creation is something that you can do. You can create as many sites as you want to either popularize a project or talk about a campaign or share the work of a team. And that's something that everybody gets. And then there's a premium offering that folks can pay for. And what that is basically licenses and some tools that help you engage with the public so that everybody in the community can become a worker for you on issues that they care about. So if you want to go out and deploy a fleet of folks in the field on Collector, they don't have to work for your organization. They can sign up and have a workspace of their own so you can collaborate with them without compromising security of your back office stuff. So you have your own ArcGIS Online organization for the company or the agency, and then there's this spin-off site for your recruits. That's how it works. So I'm going to show, instead of just showing you a matrix, I'm going to actually kind of show you what it looks like, what Hub is. Most of the team that works on ArcGIS Hub is in DC. DC is one of our early adopters. So this is the landing page for Washington, DC's open data site. So open data is just one of the initiatives that you can spin up. And the idea is, instead of navigating around ArcGIS Online and looking for stuff on your own, you can set some context and create a web page here and talk to people about what you're interested in, what projects you're working on. You can embed custom applications right here. You can link out to stuff. The public is, hopefully seeing something that's digestible and makes sense. You probably have some open data sets behind issues that people care about, but you don't want to just dump them at the open data page and say, start searching for spreadsheets and shape files and have fun. If you want to engage normal people, you have to talk to them about, issues. And that's something that, communities all have their own individual issues, but there's a lot of issues that are commonly addressed or common to different communities. So that's kind of how we organize it. So this is what ArcGIS Hub looks like to somebody in the public, say that they're searching around. This is kind of a meta example where the site is showing all the different campaigns and different things that they're working on. Here you can see our latest version of our search page. So there's different facets and tags that you can search through. You can see different items. Here, if I go down just to the initiatives, I can see that there's an initiative in DC around urban wood reuse. So we're telling a little story about a project that they're working on and the agencies that are involved. So here's an example where it's not a single department in DC that's working on this, but it's a collaboration between a couple different teams. Something that we like about Hub is that it sort of tries to break down the silos of, well, that's not really my job, it's your guys' job. Who's going to work on this and punting the ball around? This gives teams an opportunity to collaborate and share and pull resources and then both sort of get credit for this. So here we're telling a story about, who's working on this, how to get in touch if you want to get involved and get more information. It's a nice looking website. We have tools here for you to create the website with a WYSIWYG editor experience, so non-developers can do this, but there's some opportunities for developers as well. If we get down a little bit further, you'll see here there's this button here to follow the initiative. So people that are interested in this campaign, they can sign up to get more information. So if we click on this, oh, I already signed in. If I hadn't signed in before, you'd see a little pop-up. And here, let me log out so you can actually see that because there's not much going on otherwise. When it's time to follow the initiative, this is what I was talking about in terms of Hub's licensing for community members. So as of right now, folks have to use social media. They can use Facebook or Google to log in and get involved and get signed up. But here we're going to have a release of ArcGIS Online that's going to expand that capability so you can also just use an email address to sign up as a public user. But if I click through and follow this off, what's happening right now is I'm creating an ArcGIS Online account. I'm agreeing to the terms. If most of you guys have worked with ArcGIS Online, you'll know that you can't, some random person just can't join your organization and start like messing around with your data. An administrator has to approve them to join. But for Hub, it's important that folks can sign up and get involved and not immediately be greeted with this message that says like, you're not really anywhere until Bob admin says that you're allowed to participate. So this sandbox environment for the community, they're auto-activated. They can create this account. They don't automatically have any access to data, but they're a named user. So if I switch to this other gear and I look at this initiative dashboard from the perspective of the folks in the agency, I can see Andrew Turner signed in, and I think with my Google account, let's see if I might be looking at the wrong one, but if I refresh this, hopefully my name will be there too. Of course, I killed myself. You get the idea. This dashboard, because I signed in with the community account and the cookie followed me. So let me get back to, I can solve this problem. Not afraid to show demos that break. There you go. I still got Andrew Turner. But folks that are involved in these initiatives, you can email them in bulk and stay in communication with them. You can host an event and get people to sign up and get active and install something like Collector or use Survey123 or some of these products that usually require a named user. But that's basically what Hub is sort of tools to streamline that process of onboarding folks and getting in contact and staying in contact with your constituents and arrange your work so that you can tell those stories and gather that feedback that you need to gather.
Okay. So if that's what Hub is for the sort of average consumer, how can you as developers start to get tapped into this so that you can start customizing and extending Hub? And the first avenue through which, and there are a couple different avenues, we're going to all talk about them through the course of the talk, but the first avenue and sort of, excuse me, the most obvious avenue is John showed you that site. That's something that with a WYSIWYG editor, you don't need development skills to generate that site, but it is possible to use development skills to sort of customize it and give it extra special behavior. So what we're talking about here is Markdown, CSS, and JSON, no JavaScript. You're not allowed to inject scripts into that site because of the security context. But so we'll just take a quick look at what that looks like. Pardon me 1 second. Okay, so where we're going to start is with this customization tips and tricks page. So there's a page here, and we'll include the URL for it. And they just had an extensive talk on this, so we're not going to go into it very much. Just a couple of quick ideas from that talk, and that talk will be on YouTube if you missed it. But generally, the idea is that you drag these cards on the page, and certain cards allow you to, customize them by generating Markdown. The obvious one is this HTML card, which lets you put Markdown into the card itself, and as well as CSS. Now, we have an underlying CSS framework, which is Bootstrap. In particular, we're using the calcite theme of Bootstrap. So one of your first resources you want to look at is the calcite Bootstrap documentation page. So this has it's not just a theme for Bootstrap. There are a couple of additional cards there, but essentially any Bootstrap components that you could use, or styles that you could use, or any of the cards, the additional components that are available here are things you can just add to that HTML card. In terms of interactive components, if you're familiar with Bootstrap, some of its components are interactive, like drop-downs and modals. So those, we do support certain ones of those. I think it's pretty much drop-downs, modals, and maybe tabs. Should have double-checked that. But so those, you just have to put the Markdown in there, and they will be automatically wired up as soon as the card is rendered. You can go further into creating your own completely custom Markdown and CSS, if you wanted to create your own custom cards. And this site gives you a few tips, but and I'm not going to really go into it too much, but just to give you an idea of, you just embed this Markdown on the left and this style here, and you can, create custom cards like these here. So it's really kind of within the realm of Markdown and CSS. There's a little bit of the sky's the limit. We already talked about modals. There's Jack. So like I said, it's kind of a limited realm of customization, but it is something where if you have people in your team that are just dragging and dropping things, they may come to you for some support to add some interactivity or custom styles and flavors, and that's one avenue. One more thing you can do in these sites is there are certain cards that lend themselves to a little more specific behavior for developers. And one of the ones I want to draw attention to is the chart card. So we can drag a chart card onto this site here. And what you see over here is the settings for this card. So there is kind of a WYSIWYG chart builder that you can just select the chart type, and then you select the data. But then there's sort of a custom mode, and it's JSON. And essentially, what's backing this site is our Cedar library. And so if you, again, go out to the Cedar documentation, you can find out a lot more about Cedars, how you can use Cedar to build different types of charts, group bar charts, and line charts, area charts, all sorts of things like that. So essentially, if you can get a chart working over here in this Cedar environment, you can just copy and paste the JSON, and then bring it back into here and apply it. And then it's a good way to sort of go out into, Cedar, get a chart working, use your development skills there to wire it up and make it look exactly like you want, and then you can really enhance the site. And the final card that I'll mention that is sort of useful for developers is sort of our escape hatch is this is not really useful, is the iframe card, and that lets you bring in anything, excuse me, into through URL. So if you've developed something, or I was talking to someone at the booth today where they had a specific form that would generate, it was just a form, and it had some simple JavaScript backing it up that generated URLs for people, and it was something for their API, to help users of their API. And because we don't allow script tags on the page here, we couldn't just have that code actually running, but it was something that she could put easily into a simple HTML page with no backend or anything like that, and iframe it right in. Something as simple as that, all the way up to embedding, a full-on Web AppBuilder application could be embedded into a site. I'm not sure I would recommend the latter necessarily, but it's an option if you need to have that sort of running in the context of your application. And so that's what I want to talk some more about. Let's see. Is sort of applications that you would build. Again, here's the URL for that. That will be in the slides when we put them up. And there will also, as I said, the talk that we did earlier will be with a lot more details on how to go into the customization there. Because there's a lot more sort of tips and tricks. The ones, what I just showed you, they were sort of straightforward Markdown and CSS you might be familiar with. But, in order to get things to lay out just right, there's all kinds of little tricks that you do by adding blank text cards here and there. So if you want to get into that kind of stuff, that's possible. Kind of as I mentioned when talking about the iframe card, you could bring any application you wanted into a page. And one of the things, the sort of philosophy of extending Hub is it's a little bit different than other applications. So take, for example, the Web AppBuilder. You build a widget, right? You build a little piece that is embedded within an app. But the philosophy of the Hub extensibility model is that you build an app, right? And this could be something like a whole Web AppBuilder app, or it could be a story map, or it could be your own app. So when you associate these apps with initiatives, and they don't just have to be embedded inside the site, something like that, but they can be something that is all put together and branded with the same cohesive look and feel, and linked together all around an initiative. That's really how you extend Hub. And so when you're building your own app, if you're not going to build one of the things from using those tools from the platform like Web AppBuilder or Story Maps, we provide some tools for you to help build apps. The first is Hub.js, which is a JavaScript library that's going to work with some of the sort of first-class citizens that Hub brings to the platform. And I'll tell you a little bit about what those are in just a second. This builds upon ArcGIS REST.js, which is a JavaScript library for working with the rest of the platform. We have a talk on that also that's going to be available in April. You can find out more about it there, but just to kind of give you a sense of the Hub.js is a thin layer on top of REST.js, which is just a thin JavaScript layer on top of our REST API. So this is for working with items, groups, features, those sort of things that you're already familiar with. The first-class citizens that Hub adds to those types that you're already familiar with are events, annotations, and initiatives. And we'll talk a little bit what those are through the course of this demo I'm going to show. I apologize for the lack of a smooth switchy back and forth. I usually do JavaScript slides, and PowerPoint always throws me off. So, okay, so let's talk about events. Events are not something that you handle with an event handler and stop propagation and that kind of thing. Events are things that happen in the real world. They are meetings or volunteer fairs, neighborhood kickoffs, things that the Hub organization is trying to get that community engagement. They're trying to get it IRL, right? Just when you're managing events inside the Hub, there's an administrative interface that shows a list of events like this. And when you go click on any one, each event gets its own site. The site builder that we showed to generate it's like a home page, an event will get its own site or its own page. I forget. Anyway, it's a thing with a URL. And this will have, anything when the administrator configures this, they can put in, the thumbnail URL, the location, this thing shows a map, the details, the date, time, obviously. And then when citizens can register for this event, then it keeps track of who's registered, and some events can have caps on the number of attendees if it's a limited space and all that sort of thing. So the Hub.js does provide a minimal, at this point, interface for working with events, and it's mainly read-only, and the idea is searching for events and showing events. So we provide a function, not surprisingly, called search events, and let me see if I can blow this up, but what it looks like here is you pass in essentially, you may need, some events can be public, private, so you may need to pass in authentication, and then you just pass in sort of parameters that you want to filter on, the title or that sort of thing, and it will search events and bring back an array of JavaScript objects that look like this. And so you could, within your own application, show a list of events, and then click and have those go to, you look at the URL to that details page we just saw and sort of get people to register there. One thing that would be coming up into sort of the next thing we would add to the Hub.js API here would probably be a register for event method that would get the user to go through an authentication exercise, get them signed in, and then sign them up for the event. I'm going to show you an actual application here with some real working code that we pulled together for this for this today, and this is just not. It's essentially a simple demo application that's going to just use we have similar APIs I meant to show you. We have an initiatives. The other packages we have, so we have annotation. Annotations are like user comments. So we have APIs for searching for annotations, adding annotations, and then we also have initiatives. This is the other first class citizen, and this is kind of what John was showing inside the hub itself. And we have a whole bunch of functions for working with initiatives. And just to kind of let you know where this stuff comes from or why it's here, this is actually the code that we use inside the hub itself. And whenever someone else needs it, we try to move it down outside of the hub into pure JavaScript and open source it in a way that it can be used. So there's not a specific strategy right now about our API footprint should be this, so developers can do this and this and this. It's kind of a as needed basis. When some other application needs to use our events or initiatives, then we start just making it open source, putting it here inside of Hub.js. So you can see that the Hub Initiatives module is pretty well fleshed out because we have another team that's going to actually not just query initiatives and show them, they're going to be generating initiatives behind the scene. So we just built a sample hub for initiatives thing, which just allows you to search initiatives. And then when you find them, you can go find the details of one, and it just shows it here. So this would be the same code that's running inside of Hub, but we pulled it out and then brought it into this very simple Ember application. Just for context, what this to do, okay. Going to show you this. So this is up on GitHub. We'll take a look at the code real quick here in Code Sandbox if we can. Okay, looks like it's back. But I lost all the things that I had open. So here it is on, here we are on GitHub, and That's sorry, I went a little quickly. It's under Mike Juniper's repository, Hub for Devs. It's an Ember application. Mike loves Ember, so it's Ember. But you could use those functions in any framework that you wish. So we're going to go look at under here, services. So he basically, let's see if I can blow this up at all. Okay, so he's importing these two functions, search initiatives and get initiative, which is going to return the details from Esri Hub initiatives. And he's going to expose those to the application. And then we've got the index route is going to take the query parameters here and build up a search form based on the query parameters that were passed over to that route, and it's going to call search initiatives with the query string that you pass in, and then the initiative details is going to call get initiative with the initiative ID. So it's live here in Code Sandbox. You can play around with it and get a sense of how you can use that and sort of also apply the same principles to the events APIs that we provide from Hub.js. So let's as I said, that's available on GitHub. So another angle by which you as developers can kind of work with Hub is through automation of automation of certain tasks. And we have a Python library that helps you do that. And I was going to be giving a demo on that, and our colleague Minushi was who's our resident Python developer, was going to try and show me how to do it. And she's like, okay, well, I was like, how do I do this? Is this something that runs in a Jupyter notebook? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, do I npm install that? Because I'm a JavaScript developer. And she just said, no, I'm going to do it for you. So I'm going to hand it over to Minushi, and she's going to explain to you how you would use Hub.py to automate Hub tasks.
So, hello everyone. Quick show of hands. How many of us write Python, have used the Python ArcGIS API? Oh, great. So we have a great audience here who will get a lot of value out of Hub.py, hopefully. So the whole idea here of Hub.py is it's built over the Python API. It's a wrapper over it to work with your Hub content. That's initiatives, indicators. Indicators are the data that lie within initiatives on your initiative solutions, and events. We are expanding it currently to add more functionality, but down to bare basics, this is what the Python API looks like. I encourage you to install this. I have steps to install right here. Go ahead, install it, please try, and in case you have issues working with it, we encourage you to create an issue here. We'd be more than happy to fix it. So just a quick demo of what Hub.py does today and how you can interact with it and maybe automate your workflows. So let's zoom some more. Yep. So basically, to get started with Hub.py, all you need to do is install the package and then just import it. Once you've done that, in order to connect to your organization associated with the Hub, you need to give in the very minimum the org URL. Adding credentials, logging in with credentials has benefits. We'll look at that shortly. But in the very basics, if you just provide the URL and then connect to your Hub. So test Hub is a hub that I have connected to using just the org URL. Next, using that, we are going to just fetch a few initiatives. So for my username that's with me as an owner, I'm just looking for all the initiatives that have been created and that are publicly available. And let's see what we find. Yes, there's one that I've created for walkability assessment. It successfully pulls that up for us. Now I'm seeing, as an anonymous user who hasn't yet logged into my hub, I've just given the org URL, not yet logged in, how many initiatives that are publicly available for me to browse through, to look at. So, wow, we have 15 publicly available initiatives that you can look through, you can browse and maybe look for ideas. Then another thing you can do is search for events. You can search for events based on the location, on the title, even the initiative they're associated with. We'll just do a simple vanilla event search to see how many events are there within our hub. Okay, we've got 4 events, not bad. And now, like for those of us who worked with events, we know you have to have a location allocated to the event. So let's try to plot the 4 events on a map and see what we get. Okay, so we see a lot of events right here in Washington, DC. That's where our product's based out of. Zooming in, we see all these points on the map, and clicking on any one generates details about, Zooming into one generates extra details. It gives you a pop-up with the event details. So basically, we just saw as an anonymous user how you can play with Hub.py. Now, in case you want to create content and you want to make changes to your particular initiatives, you need to sign in. So let's basically sign in and see what happens. So it asks me for my password. Great, no typos. So now that we have signed in successfully, let's now see how many initiatives it pulls up. Previously, we saw it pulled up about 15 public initiatives. Now that I am an authorized user into the system, into this hub, let's see how many initiatives I get. Oh, wow. So there are a total of 188 initiatives on the hub, out of which only 15 are made publicly available. Now that I have signed into my hub, I can even create an initiative. As we know, an initiative is basically an item. An item requires properties. So in order to create an initiative, the very minimum that you need to provide is the type of the item you're creating, that's Hub Initiative here, and a title so that you can reference it. So the title we're going to be using for this demo is Python add initiative. Let's execute this and maybe try adding the initiative. So my hub.initiative add with the properties helps you add the initiative. Okay, lovely. It has added the initiative. Let's verify that. Meanwhile, we can also look on our hub website to see if it has successfully added the initiative. Yep, so we do see Python add initiative got added. Going back to our organization, yes, it has created the item here as an initiative. You can also pull up additional properties about the initiative, like when was it created and what perhaps are other privileges I have. Maybe if you want to share it and if you are the owner, you can do all of that. So just to give you an example, let's pull up the owner name. There, it pulls up the owner name. And to work with this initiative more, let's just reference the initiative ID and store it in this variable. Now, let's try updating this same initiative. So I'm just going to be updating that dictionary. I'm changing the title to Python update initiative. Just changing the title and seeing if that works. So in order to update an initiative, all you need to provide is the initiative ID that we stored previously right here in cell 15 and the updated properties. Let's go and verify if it has changed the name. So right here on Hub, there, it did successfully change the name of the initiative. Now, as we all know, an initiative has solution templates, and the solution templates have indicators, which are data used to configure the solutions. So right here. This example here is a Vision Zero initiative. It has a site, it has a story map application, it has another Web AppBuilder application. And as we see for this particular solution, it requires one initiative, and I have configured it. Let's try and see if we can basically search for this initiative and for this indicator and successfully fetch it. So this is the initiative ID that you need in order to reference this initiative. Once we get that, we're saving it in this variable and then searching for indicators based off of that. And there, it successfully pulled up that particular registered indicator layer. For us, it stores necessary properties such as the indicator ID and the URL. So if it is a feature layer sitting on your organization somewhere, it will reference that in case you need to work with it, do analyses with it. It even fetches the item ID associated with that, the name of the layer. As you can see, this layer maybe has this name. So it's a name that is stored in your organization when you add it as an item, and other necessary column mappings and matchings that's necessary to work with. Now that we can even search in indicators, let me quickly even show you what else can be done. Oops, wrong. But yep, you can even add an indicator, delete, get, search, and there's a lot more that you can do. All of those particular methods are reserved for analysis. That's in case you want to do analysis with your data. But let's even look at deleting this particular initiative, the Python add update initiative that we've been working with. So since we have already fetched its initiative ID, let's try deleting it. Okay, it has returned a true. Seems successful. Let's verify it back here on Hub. And there, it has luckily and successfully deleted, thus not breaking the demo. And moving on to our JavaScript experts.
Thank you. Back to 4. Right. Myself back on. All right, so we've shown you some Ember, we've shown you some Python. We want to show you some other fancy stuff as well. We talk about just sort of different ways you can write some code and share it in different contexts. We've had some customers that want to embed pieces of the Hub in their own websites, like they use another content management system like Drupal or WordPress. So I showed this off briefly last night in a REST.js talk, and they alluded to it or showed it or teased it in the demo theater earlier. So I thought it'd be worth actually showing a little bit of the code or just showing this thing in action. It's not anything much. Oh, I'm not back in. First step, plug it in. 3, 2, 1, there we go. So it's not much to look at in terms of it just being a button, but we wanted to hit you with some examples that weren't overly complex and convoluted. So you can look, the thing that's kind of cool about this is if you look at this element and inspect it in the DOM, a web component is a shareable bit of code that is entirely encapsulated. Both the JavaScript logic and the CSS styling are sandboxed and have a barrier between what's in the component and what's in the rest of the app. So doing this allows us to drop code like this in somewhere else and get some functionality in a totally different location. So in the application, we'll switch gears here and look at the index.html. This is a simple page, right, because there's just a button in it. But dropping in this web component, it takes a couple of parameters to customize it. One is that initiative ID we keep talking about. One is the community org. We want to know what organization these community users are actually going to want to sign up for. And then a client ID is something that we need for OAuth. If you're going to have people authenticate, ArcGIS needs to know where they're coming from in order to protect the users. So when we use this thing, we click on the button, it opens up this dialog that you've seen 100 times. And whether I use an existing login, I'm going to try the same Google sign in. So before, last time it said, oh, what do you want your username to be? Do you agree to the terms? This time I'm using that same social media account and it's just signing me in. If I go here to the network tab, we can look and I'm making a request to REST request to update that user's tags to actually identify that user as being a participant in that particular initiative ID. And that's all it takes to display that user in that other admin dialog that I showed you before. So the logic in here is as simple as adding a tag to a user or removing the tag, and then that authentication flow of helping them sign in. There's a little bit of sugar as well in Hub.js world. I told you before that besides a normal organization where an admin has to sign folks in, they can automatically register. And what we do behind the scenes to do a little housekeeping is as soon as they log in, we make sure that they're a publicly searchable user for the folks in the organization, and we set a couple of tags just to sort of act as a primer. So that little bit of logic isn't even here in the web component, it's in Hub.js. But I've got some imports that you've seen before. So Stencil is the project that I'm using for this application. And then I've got some REST.js and Hub.js imports. And there's not really too much to this button at all. I've got a component where I declare the properties. So these props are actually read-only. They're not mutable within the context of the app. But I've got another prop that is mutable. I'm going to attach a user session once I've got authentication. And I'm just listening for the click event on this button. And once that happens, if there's not already a session, if they're not already signed in, we kick off the OAuth flow with a promise and we wait for that to resolve. That takes a few seconds. Once that resolves, we get the user metadata first. First we have to check their tags to see whether we need to actually add any tags or not. And then here I've got a couple of utility functions to check whether the user's following or actually do the work. So that happens in a utility, another ES6 class. So this is kind of neat because you can have your components share business logic behind the scenes. So if we add another component to do something else, we can reuse some of the same common logic. But this, this is like 90 lines of code or so, and then this thing is probably even less than that, about 50 lines of code. And we end up making a request to update the user tag. So it's kind of a cool example of doing something that's tangible and gets people involved, but it's not too overwhelming. So you're welcome to rip that code off, or if you've got questions, I'll switch back. I think he's got the repo on there. This is another thing that we open sourced here recently. We're going to be adding more to, so it's in the Esri DC GitHub org. And that's our last demo of little bits and bobs and things that you can build. I'm sure you guys are already building stuff of your own. And the next question that everybody's always asking is, how do I surface this in Hub for, users? Tom showed how you could do that in a site kind of one at a time. And that's a real common workflow. It's like how most of these engagements will start. But the idea of deploying it at scale or making it available to lots of users is super interesting too. So Dave breezed through earlier in his talk. He showed a few screenshots, and I think he did a good job of explaining the flow, but I think it'll be actually useful to do it and get our hands dirty, and I'll show you, one, how easy it is, and two, how not quite perfect and seamless of an experience it is so far. We just released this functionality really recently. So there's some more docs and links. We'll switch back to that at the end, but I'm just going to switch gears again and get back in the browser. So, all right. So say I've got an app. Here's my running app, and I wanted to stick with a simple app. This uses Esri Leaflet, but it might as well use the JavaScript API. Most of you, if you're web developers, have written an app like this. If you're Python developers, I guess you could do that in Jupyter Notebooks too now. But we picked a base map. We've got a layer we're gonna draw, and we've got a little welcome screen. So I want to keep the code nice and simple. So if you look at this app, it's a glorious 8 lines of code. We create the map, we add the base map, and instead of just adding the feature layer to it, these bike lanes that are on top via the service URL, which is kind of the normal way to do it, I want to fetch those and have that be dynamic. So in this application, you can see when I scroll through, let me refresh that map so I can see it. So here we query for the feature services. Before that, we make this request. Up here in the URL, I pass a URL parameter. That's the app ID. So this is an app that's registered in ArcGIS Online. And if I get this response, I've got some just configuration settings. So it's a real common practice, right? When you're writing code to pull from config values instead of hard coding stuff. And the two different values I got says, one is the URL of this feature layer, and two, the name of the organization. And I'm pulling those just from the item. Looking at this item, here's an ArcGIS Online. If you create a new item in ArcGIS Online and you tell it it's a web application, you're just basically creating a placeholder and you point at the URL. So I've got this running on my own server. GitHub Pages is hosting this. And I hard code, once I knew what the ID of the item was, I attached that as a URL parameter. And this is kind of like I wouldn't say it's inception. It's just pointing back at itself in order to pull the configuration. So I wanted the simplest app that is configurable that we could come up with. And that data, if you guys have seen this before, you may or may not have, if we dip into the settings tab, back here, choosing the type of item being a configurable application, passing in configuration parameters like this, I could have set this JSON up however I wanted because I'm the only one reading the schema, but I followed the convention of ArcGIS Online, the configurable web mapping application templates, all those templates that you see and that you can share, and they're open source and can be extended. You might as well follow that same pattern so that you can take advantage of some of the benefits. Usually an application is pulling a web map and all the sort of content that's in the map and styling, and you can get pretty involved. I wanted to just do something a little simpler, but it works exactly the same way. So here's my item. This is all I have. And what I really want to do is have every Hub user that looks through this gallery not just see all the stuff in the gallery already. We could take a look at an example of a preview. These are all fleshed out where we've got applications and content. We can wire up our indicators, and when we activate this, we're really just rapidly architecting and spinning up all the items and dealing with everything for them to make it a lot easier so that they can have a playbook for how to tackle a problem. So I don't know how to really tackle any problems, but I'm going to pretend that I do for a minute. Looking at the gallery right here, these are from Esri, but there's also this option for users to look at initiatives, templates from their organization or from anywhere or their own. So you can share these with users. And the way that we do this is we look at the initiatives manager. By default, we're looking at initiatives. If I switch this to look at templates, you can see here the URL changed. Now we're looking at a template. I've got a backup in case I totally botch this because that's a possibility. But I'm going to try to do this from scratch, right? We're going to create a brand new template. And I'm going to name this template Dev Summit Doing It Live. So creating this initiative template, there's some content that's getting created the same way it works for people when they activate the initiative. The scaffolding is getting put into place. So here I've got Dev Summit Doing It Live. There's not much in here yet, but I don't even think it's up to you as developers to like design this whole thing. You're going to work with subject matter experts. It could be higher education or a nonprofit, or you have a consulting group, whatever group of people that knows the issues, right? And how we track progress and how we tackle some of these problems that's going to help break this up. The default sort of template for us is we see it as partly informing the public about what you're doing, partly about listening to the public about maybe what they think you should be doing or what else is going on. And then 3, monitoring your progress, right? Being empirical. Those aren't the only options though. You can add a brand new section, dancing. You can do whatever you want here. You can reorder the steps. You can add descriptions here. I think as long as I'm in here, I should set the focal area for this image. I can edit the banner, and here, this is my image. I don't like this image. I'm going to grab another image. I think I have Esri's original logo here available. That is very high resolution and perfect. And then that looks terrible, but I think it's going to look okay if I switch the focal point to that. So here I've got, whatever, different text. And obviously you would put a lot more work into this, but this is discernibly different than the other ones. That's what I'm going for, right? So now I'm ready to add some content, and I want to find that app that I just had before. And I think I've got the URL saved. If I hadn't created some other copies of this while I was learning how to do this, I'd search for it by name, but I'm going to search for the item type. Here's that example app that I showed you a second ago. This is great. Selecting this is taking what was a hard code, it was a web mapping application, it was configurable, but it was all hard coded in that the values that it was going to read were already written out. By default, we read that in, and we're looking at this template now, it passes through all that same stuff, right? And what I want to do is allow other users to pass in their own data. So here, I need to have an indicator. Their bike lanes weren't the ones that I loaded the first time, they're different. So I'm going to define an indicator of my own. It's got to be a polyline, right? Because it's a bike lane, or maybe somebody's got a polygon, I don't know. If I wanted to get more involved, I could take a field name like type of bike lane, whether it's a class 1 or 2 or 3, and do something in my app with it. And so you can not only define indicators by a service, you can actually define a schema. And you have a field name, and they can map whatever they call that same field, they can map it. So they don't have to, their data doesn't have to exactly look at a particular way. It makes it more flexible. So I'm saving this. Great. Now I've got an indicator. So now where I did hard code this service URL, now I can dip into these bike lanes. I got my cursor in there and I can click. Now I can templatize that and say, when this initiative template gets activated by somebody else, they're going to find their bike lanes and swap those out, and then they'll go here. And instead of Cleveland, Ohio, we're going to have, here's some indicators or other variables that are there automatically. The organization information is accessible to us, so we're going to choose the name of the organization. And I think that's all we got to do in here. A short description. Oh, something else. Yeah, we got a name. It's got a key. I think I'm going to give it the name of what the versions of this app that come out. I can say for, and then here you can't click and do the templating. We'll probably add that. But if we do, what was it? Organization name. Yeah, not org, it's organization. So I can say organization name. That one I had to type in, so that's a little more painful, but that's okay too. And there's one gotcha here. I can save this and go back to the initiative template editor. Now I've got still the blank, not so great thumbnail here. Now it tells people that if they don't have the bike lanes, they can't run this app because it doesn't do much to begin with, and it won't do anything if we don't have any bike lanes. You can also make them optional. You can add a bunch of indicators if you want. If you have an indicator for one of these individual solutions, and you add another app to it and you use the same indicator name, when they configure it the first time, both of the apps will be hydrated. So this is kind of a lot nicer for the end user. It's still tedious for us, but we're developers, we're used to it. But for the end user, they don't have to go in and configure web maps one at a time and duplicate their work to get it to sort of display in different places. All right, how am I doing on time? I'm running low, so I better hurry up. There's one more thing I gotta do though. Here's my initiative template. There's another edit I got to make because I found a little problem in our glorious app so far. Have you guys ever used AGO Assistant? Any of these tools that allow you to edit the raw JSON for items? Here is my item, and I noticed in here in the data, in that templating process, bear with me. I'm not looking at the right thing. We messed up the URL. Let me actually deploy it. I'm going to do this a different way and prove that I'm not scared. So now I've got a new template. I go back to the gallery. I'm going to deploy this, and I know it's not going to work, but don't worry, I've got another plan up my sleeve. So now I'm going to switch to look at the templates for my organization. So once you share it with a user, doesn't matter what organization they're in, they're going to see your great, better, more advanced template than this. And when they preview this thing, they'll see the same options that you say, oh, here is a cool solution template I can deploy. Great. I see what the steps are, how this whole playbook of how am I going to deal with this problem. All right, great. So I want to activate this initiative. I'm going to call this one deployed. So the same thing, it cooks up the groups, the item, the content for them behind the scenes automatically. The thing that actually makes this chug for 15 seconds is, besides the one custom app that we brought to the table, you're going to bring more than that, we also have automatically a site that goes along with the initiative. So initiatives and sites, they're not the same thing, but if you have an initiative, you need to have a landing page for it. So that you get out of the box, you can customize that as well, of course. Now I've got to add some data, right? So I'm switching to user mode. Bike lanes, I got to search for my bike lanes. So they have to bring something to the table too. They have to have some data sets that are going to bring some information to bear. If they had to map the attributes, they'd do that too, but we're just going to keep it easy. Now that I've added the data, it's time to configure this app. So we're cooking a version of this. This is making a copy of the template, and now we're hard coding the variables again with real values. So if I click OK and share this with everybody, and I click View, the problem is, instead of johngravois.com, it assumed that this app was getting hosted on City of X, like in their ArcGIS Online organization. So we can fix this too. And the way we do that is, here, this URL, no, this is actually, I know what it is. The whole initiative. I'm going to go back to the template. I'm going to go back to my initiatives, switch back to my templates, go back to doing it live, go back to edit this template, and the solution is the item I've got to update. I'm going to go back into my Razor editor. This is super dangerous. You can break stuff. You have to be careful. This item, you can see the indicators in the templates. Here's my item for my example app. And when I look at the URL, we accidentally overwrote and took what was johngravois.com and overwrote it with the org. So I can just add this back, johngravois.com. Dev Summit, save this. And the cool thing is, as soon as I make that update, here is we'll go back to it. In the initiatives, I switch back to looking at active initiatives. The deployed version, if I click on it, this one's busted, so I'm just going to delete it. But as soon as I delete it, I've got this option to deploy it again. And the fact I already configured that indicator, so we save that information. When I configure this app a second time, it looks live at that JSON that we just edited. And if you make some corrections, you don't have to start from scratch and create the template again and add all the content to it. It's okay to make mistakes, and that's all part of the process. So when I view this one, now it actually is on johngravois.com. So we've still got some kinks to work out in this editor. You're still, we're all getting paid to deal with looking at scary JSON because other people don't want to do it. But that's kind of where we're at. This just got released last Tuesday, I think. So if you guys are messing around with it, you're going to be some of the first folks to do it. It's exciting, but it's also still obviously not polished. That's it as far as the demo goes. We've got some more sort of links to documentation that'd be helpful. That configurable app spec for the rest of ArcGIS Online is stuff that's useful. This is just some slides that we talk about sort of making your app templatable and turning an app into a solution. This is the full talk. That's all we got. Luckily, we're out of time anyway, so thank you guys for joining us late in the conference. Does anybody have any questions?
If your template needs you publish it for sharing with your organization or publicly, and it needs to have a particular data set created for it to work. Is there a way for that to happen automatically, or do you have to tell somebody to set up the indicator ahead of time? Can it automatically create an indicator upon deployment or instantiation?
I mean, that's probably a job for Python to create indicators automatically, but I see it in the sense that when you're creating your templates, you're going to try to make it as simple as possible, but there are going to be situations or times when, if a data set in some form doesn't exist, you can't really get started. And whether you automate it, at a minimum, just having documentation that says, here's this premium initiative template, and what it requires is that you have a data set like this, and it might need to be that they procure it or pay for it, or that they have it and share it and get the politics and policy in line. We're trying to make that easier by having the schema be less rigid than it used to be. A long time ago, Esri's shared data models for consistency to try to make organizations more successful. And at first we just had data models and white papers, and people adopted them if they wanted to. People think that they're snowflakes, and that's okay. So then we came out with ArcGIS Solutions, and we had apps that said, hey, if you can get your data into exactly this format, you'll get some apps and stuff out of it instead of dealing with one-off customizations. And that helped kind of. I feel like this is a third generation of, you still have to do it, but if we don't care what the URL is, and we don't care whether you call the fatalities column fatalities or deaths or something else, and we figure it out for you, we're getting closer to automated. There's probably more you could do to make that even easier.
And we have automated
automated it in Python, actually.
Well, there you go.
So in case you want to add a new indicator to your initiative, all you have to do is just give us the bare minimum based on the schema I just showed for indicator search, and it automatically adds it for you. So if you give in a list or a dictionary or rather list of dictionaries, it's just going to add all of those to your solution template.
I'm also a big fan of this notion of you supply a data set that is the best you can and let them substitute a superior data set if they have access to it. So the notion of creating your template such that the indicator for them is optional, and if they don't have it, you'll instead load the layer that you have. Sometimes that's going to make sense and sometimes it's not. Anybody else? If you're still the kind of rock and roller that's here with your notepad and pen tomorrow, Manushi's going to get into more detail on urban analytics with ArcGIS Hub and talk about some of those details too. And we're going to be hanging out right out here. So if you're shy but you got a question, we can chat in the lobby. Thank you guys for joining us.